Good evening, everybody. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. I don't know if you have looked at the agenda. I'd like to have a motion proposed by Danny, seconded by Councillor Deva. All those in favour? Against? Motion carried. This brings us number 3. Are there any items that would put you in a conflict of interest situation? No. If not, we are on number 4. Presentation 4.1, Property Valuation Services. By Paul Beasley, Municipal Account Manager. He's going to make a presentation. Good morning. Yeah. How are you? Thank you.
I'll just say a quick good evening, everyone, as well, and bonjour. Rod Tremblay, Assistant Director of Operations with PVSC. Nice to be back with you again. My more embarrassing council presentation where I can't go in French, being called Tremblay, but here we are. So I will go ahead and share the screen. Paul is going to take the first little bit of the presentation, and then I'll finish up.
Sounds good. It's all yours.
Just let me know if you have any issues seeing that there, but it should be on your screen now.
Yep. All right. So the presentation, you've probably taken a look at some of the slides. It's fairly similar format to last year. So I'm going to go through very quickly the first few slides, point out a couple of things, and then that'll let us get into the heart of the presentation, which is Rod, the numbers that Rod will talk to you about here in a little bit. So go ahead, Rod. So just a reminder, our public service announcement, we are responsible for assessing all the properties in Nova Scotia. We're independent, not for profit. We're municipally funded by all 49 municipalities. And we still have approximately 130 employees working across the province. Go ahead, Rod. What we do and what we don't do. Again, you'll remember that we do all the assessments for some 647,000 properties. That's up about 15,000 from last year. What we don't do, we don't set the tax rates. We don't collect the taxes. We don't create tax policy, and we don't provide tax relief. As you can appreciate in these times of increasing assessments, we do get quite a few calls, and we do get we do get the odd comment from councils around the province saying, can't you do something about, the tax burden on the residents around the province? Well, no, we can't. We set the assessments at market value, and, the things such as tax rates, tax relief, and collecting taxes, that's within your purview under the Municipal Government Act. So that's kind of where the separation of powers is, so to speak. All right, Rod. So we assess at market value. You'll recall that we assess based on market value 1 year in the past. So January 1st of 2023 is the market valuation date for the 2024 roll that we just finished. All right, Rod. And we use mass appraisal methodology to do all 640,000 properties around Nova Scotia. We do break it down into municipalities and neighborhoods. So we're not comparing the district of Clare with, say Cape Breton or Antigonish or something like that. We base it on market value analysis within your municipality or within the very close proximity to the municipality. All right, Rod. 3 approaches we use. You'll recall the sales comparison approach that I spoke about briefly last year, the income approach, mainly for things such as apartment buildings, retail, strip malls, and say hotel, motels, that type of thing. And then the cost approach as well for the more unique properties that don't fit the income or sales comparison method. Sales comparison by far is used for residential properties in and around the province. All right, Rod. So just a reminder of the important dates. The base date, as I said, 1 year ago, January 1st, 2023, market valuation date for the 2024 roll. Then the state date, which is the characteristics and physical state of the properties right up until December 1st of 2023, just before the roll gets finalized. The assessment roll went out on January the 8th, and the appeal period was 31 days to February the 8th, 2024. And residents within Clare took full advantage of the opportunity to appeal, as Rod will give you some numbers here in a little bit. So finally, the capped assessment program. I think you're getting pretty well versed on the cap, although there's always questions. But the important part to this slide is that the cap rate for 2024 was set at 3.2%. That's what the Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index was at the time that the roll was set, and that's what the province gave us as the CPI number in order to incorporate that into the CAP program. The other interesting part is, given the market value increases, the fairly substantial market value increases, more and more properties are now eligible for the cap. So in the District of Clare, I think it went to, I have the number somewhere, but
89% this year.
89% of the residential improved properties, those properties with dwellings on them, are 89% are now cap eligible for the cap. And I think it was 81 or 86 last year, Rod?
81.
81% last year. So given the large market increase, that cap kicked in, that 3.2% kicked in for more and more properties. So I'll pass it over to you, to Rod, to walk through some of the numbers, and we'll go from there.
Thanks very much, Paul. So my next slide here, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the relevant assessment roll activity. This is specific, so these numbers reflect the municipality of Clare specifically. So last year we reviewed 233 building permits. So these are permits that may indicate a change in value to that individual property. So what we call new growth, or an increase to assessment that's not directly attributable to the market for real property, but rather to physical changes to individual property. So we reviewed 233 building permits last year for the 2024 assessment roll. Our assessors reviewed 544 property transactions. So we receive all property transactions from the Nova Scotia Registry of Deeds, whether those property transactions are MLS listed or sort of a typical sale, or whether it's a private sale. And the vast majority of those sales are reviewed to determine if they represent the market, and used in our reassessment activity to determine how the market changes year over year. And that's the same for the municipality of Clare. I will indicate on the sheet there, I wanted to keep this consistent with what was in the presentation that the councillors and the warden have been provided. Our appeal number for 2023 is actually 195. That 131 was last year's number. So it's actually a great talking point, as Paul had referenced, that appeal numbers are up this year, as we would expect to see based on the numbers that I'm about to show you here on the next page. So I have these broken down into percentages as well, but I'll just go through them sort of one by one and explain a little bit about what this means from a municipal perspective, I suppose. So we have 2023 on the right, 2024 on the left. So you can see in 2023, total residential assessment within the municipality of Clare, 793 million. For this year, that's increased to 1,040,000. So congratulations, you're up and over the billion mark. So last year, 2023, the year-over-year increase for residential was 12.5%. There's a very significant increase this year to 31.1% year over year. And as you can see, there's a significant difference between those two numbers. And the reason for that is the market. So we've seen sort of a bit of a tempering of the COVID market over the past couple of years, but recall, as Paul mentioned earlier in the presentation, that our assessments are 1 year retrospective. So we're looking at the end of 2022, January 1st of 2023. That's sort of the market date or the market conditions that we're reflecting. And especially throughout rural Nova Scotia, we've seen a trend whereby assessments have climbed quite significantly this year as well due to the volume of sales. So being able to see a significant enough volume of sales that gives us a strong indication of that market condition so we can make that decision confidently and make sure that we're able to defend those values as well. The second number down, total residential with cap, or the second row there, this is also a really, really important number for council to have, as this is the difference in your taxable assessment under the residential rate. So that increase is 9.7% year over year, so from 731 million to 806. And the reason for the difference between the two, that's the impact of the capped assessment program. So as Paul mentioned, a couple of things have changed with the cap from last year. So while the provisions of the capped assessment program remain the same, the CPI is provided to us from the Nova Scotia government annually. Last year it was 7.7%. This year, that CPI that we were provided in November was 3.2%. So what that does is, the larger the difference between our determination of market movement year over year and the Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index, the more properties will be capped, all things remaining equal. And that's where you're seeing the difference there. So you can see that the difference between your total residential with cap in 24 is quite a bit more than your difference total residential with cap in 2023. So basically what that means is there's a little bit more effect to the capped assessment program this year in terms of taxable dollars available to the municipality based on the provisions of the cap program. Your commercial assessment role, as is consistent with the vast majority of rural Nova Scotia municipalities and even within HRM, the commercial assessment role represents a much smaller portion, under 10% of your total assessment role, as you can see. And the total commercial assessment lift was 5.6%, with a larger lift to commercial taxable of 11.6%. There are a number of exempt properties in the municipality as well. So that's increased from 937 million to 1.192 billion. Or sorry, I'm reading the wrong number. 143 million to 151. I was reading the bottom number. I apologize. So I'll just talk a little bit about sector highlights outside of the residential market. I think most folks are fairly knowledgeable of sort of how the residential market has moved over the past couple of years. Certainly the increase that we saw throughout Nova Scotia due to COVID. The commercial market has taken a little bit of a different path depending on the sector, and that's why we wanted to include this slide in our presentation this year. So although we've seen a lot of inflation affecting cost of building materials and labor, we continued to see a lot of commercial development throughout the province. We saw very strong growth, especially in business and industrial parks and the warehousing industry. So this would be examples like our business parks in HRM, such as Burnside or Bayers Lake, as well as some of the smaller business parks throughout the province. We continue to see strong growth in the apartment sector. This is due to the continued demand for housing, which is very prominent in the media right now, as many are aware that there's a significant housing shortage in Nova Scotia. And they continue, apartments and construction of multifamily continues to be perceived to be a strong investment, as there's a significant demand for this type of housing. So we're seeing both acquisition, development of new construction, as well as remodeling of existing construction. We see steady tenancy and increased leases in the retail sector, but not a lot of movement there year over year. And the office sector has remained flat. Again, this is not of particular relevance to your municipality, although we certainly wanted to comment on it around the differences between the different classes of commercial property and how they're valued based on the market for those individual types of properties. And they may be valued differently based on whether they trade on their income, as Paul mentioned, or whether we are valuing them on a depreciated cost model or based on what other properties sell for. comment briefly on some of the natural disasters that happened. This has been a file that I continue to work extensively with throughout the province of Nova Scotia, with a special focus on the wildfire impacts both in Shelburne County as well as in HRM, and also some of the flooding happened that happened throughout the province in July of 2023. So our 2024 assessments consider the impacts of 2023 wildfires and floods. We work directly with impacted municipalities as soon as we identified these issues to share information and communicate with affected property owners, determine what properties had been physically affected, and make those adjustments for the 2024 assessment roll year. And we continue to monitor those impacted areas closely for market trends, for our general reassessment, as well as rebuilding efforts to make sure we assess what's physically located on those properties. So our contact information is here. Municipal staff can contact our 1-800 number and just identify which municipality you're calling from. There is a unique email for municipal inquiries as well. This allows you to reach Paul even faster, and property owners can contact us at inquiry@pvsc.ca or through our 1-800 number. Paul did mention that the appeal period has passed for this year, ended February 8th of 2024. However, certainly we're always happy to chat with property owners at any time of year about concerns that they might have around their assessed value. So I'll open the floor to some questions, and I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone again. And thanks very much.
Well, if there's any questions or comments, Councillor Kummo?
When you talk about the, you mentioned neighborhood, and you were talking about the market value and the same conversation there. Do you look at the municipality as a whole, or do you look at different areas, like, let's say, more dense populated areas, or like hubs or whatever? Like, and the reason I ask this question is because you have some taxpayers who may have an increase in assessment of $50,000 on their property, and their neighbor may have an increase of $75,000, $80,000. You know what I mean? So they asked me that question: is how do you assess the market value in a community like Clare? Is it as a whole, or how do you break that down?
But it's a great question, Councillor Kummo. Thanks, Paul. I don't know if you wanted to weigh in, or certainly I'm happy to.
No, go ahead.
To take a stab at it. So it's a great question, one we very commonly receive. So certainly happy to speak to it. So the answer is it's not the entire municipality as a whole. That's quite binary. Certainly we're looking at, while we would report an increase. So as you've seen in the numbers, we report numbers to municipalities through our reporting around an overall increase in the municipality. But when I say that there's a 31% residential assessment lift in the municipality, that doesn't mean that every homeowner will see 31%. So there's different market areas identified within the municipality based on how properties are trading in that area. So the size of that market area would depend a little bit on the nature of that area. So a more built up area would be more likely to have a smaller or a more constrained sort of neighborhood or market area, because we'd see a sufficient volume of property transactions in a smaller area where it's more dense. In an area that's rural, as the majority of the municipality is, we would often have a larger market area because we have to be able to have a sufficient volume of sales. But we're always comparing like properties to like properties, as Paul mentioned. So we're not going to necessarily use the sale of a waterfront executive property to value a manufactured home that's on a small lot and does not have a water influence, or is some distance from amenities. So all of those factors come into play in terms of our determining a year-over-year increase for an individual property owner. The other thing that's really important is the data that's assessed to the property. So we make site visits to properties for a number of reasons. We completed over 12,000 of them last year as related to our municipal permit file for all of the 49 municipalities. So if something's physically changing on a property, then we'll visit that property to determine what impact that physical change has on the value. So if an old home has been torn down and a brand new home has been constructed, of course, it's really trading almost in a different market than it previously was, because it's a very different improvement, right? So that's part of it, is what's physically assessed to the property helps us determine what's most appropriate to compare it to, and that can drive the differences in those increases year over year.
I think the other thing that I can add to that, and Rod explained it very well, we also look at different sort of different categories as well within, you know, the neighborhoods and within the municipality as far as you know, attributes of the home. But one of them is the age of the home. We do provide some stats on that to the municipality every year, and so depending on the age of the home, what we saw, and these specific sales data. So what we saw is the homes that were built prior to 1980, between sort of 1940 and 1980, they saw a much bigger increase or percentage increase than the homes that were built from 1980 to 2000, for instance. And I think you can appreciate that the lower value homes, there was a lot more competition to try to get a home, to buy a home. So it I think that kind of pushed the market up a little bit in these homes that were a little bit older, maybe had a little lower list price on them and had more competition as far as the vast number of people that were looking for homes in that sort of price range. So things like that, it sort of plays into it as well, and within the various markets, within the various neighborhoods.
Thank you. I have another question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
For the cap assessment, I know a little bit about it, but do you mind going back, giving a bit of history on how it was created and where it derives from?
Well, I can go back and I'll take that one, and Rod can jump in. But it was created in the early 2000s, essentially in the 2002. I think the legislation might have been just before the 2000s, but essentially it really got into action in the early 2000s. I think it was put into it was new legislation created at the time when waterfront properties along the South Shore were increasing at a dramatic rate. And of course, the fear was that people couldn't afford to be in their homes anymore along the South Shore. So they brought in the legislation which sort of came in across the whole province. And originally when it came in, the cap was at 10%, couldn't increase any more than 10%. In any one particular year. And then they changed it to CPI, probably in around the 2010, 2007, 2010 range, in that area. And then it's sort of continued on since then. That was the intent of it, so that the value that that they were paying taxes on a particular house would not go up any more than what the consumer price index would. So essentially it was capped. A ceiling was placed on it each year based on CPI. And most of the properties, or pretty much all the properties that could be eligible, were automatically placed into the program in 2007. Originally you had to request to be put into you had to apply to go into the cap. In 2007, it changed so that everybody that was eligible under the criteria would automatically be eligible could be in the cap program. There's various factors as to what makes it eligible in any particular year, such as a sale that's not a family sale, that type of thing, or if it's owned by a business as well. So there are some factors in there, but essentially a good percentage of the houses in Nova Scotia that are eligible for cap entered the cap program in 2007, and those properties are still owned by, a significant percentage are still owned by the same people that had them in 2007. And that's where you can see some pretty large differences between the cap taxable value and the market value, because since 2007, every year it's been based on CPI, whereas the market's been going up at a greater rate pretty much every year. You want to throw anything in there, Rod, that was a little bit
I think
sketchy?
that was I think that was fairly comprehensive. If Councillor Camo has any specific questions, certainly happy to field those. But I think that's a good cap history. We're about 20 years down the road now, but I think the really important important point that Paul mentioned was this compounding effect, right? So every year that the market increases exceed the consumer price index, you're compounding your cap advantage, or your difference between your cap and your assessed value is sort of compounded each year, almost like an interest rate on a savings account or something, right? You're getting more over time. So no two caps are the same. You could have 6 identical bungalows on one street, and one of them could be capped at, say 60% of its assessed value because that homeowner has been in the property since pre-2000 and has been enrolled in the cap program since the beginning. Another property could have been purchased 2 years ago, so their cap would be based on their assessment from the year following their purchase, so 1 year ago. So the cap that they have this year would be based on last year, brought forward by the CPI. So they would see maybe some advantage of 5, 6, 8%, depending on how their assessment moved, but it wouldn't be nearly as much. They may see that advantage 10, 15 years down the road, all things remaining equal. But it can be very different for different property owners depending on the terms of that cap. Does that sort of help to provide some context?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And there's certainly some great information on our website as well around eligibility. So if property owners have questions around who's eligible, what type of transactions are eligible to carry a cap through, all of that information is in detail on our public website as well.
Any other questions, or Councillor DeVoe?
Thank you very much. It's just another, it's still on the cap, clarification on the cap. So are you saying that right now, if you build or buy a house, that you can still be capped, or is that, or you can't?
So the short answer is yes.
Okay.
But your cap is going to be based on where your assessment lands. So if you imagine, and it's a little bit with new construction, there's 2 different scenarios. So there's a scenario where you own a piece of vacant land already,
Mm-hmm.
and that piece of vacant land is capped, and then you add a new dwelling or structure to that land,
Mm-hmm.
and continue to be eligible by all the other provisions of the program.
Okay,
I won't detail them. In that case, what we would do is you would always have a cap, but we would adjust that cap for the physical changes. So whenever something physically changes on the property, it's the same if you're in your house is capped, and you add a detached garage to your, the end of your driveway.
Mm-hmm.
It's a building permit. We would visit the site or give you a call to determine the details of the construction. We'd add that to your assessment, so everyone's familiar. Typically, if you build something, your assessment will go up a little bit, and your cap would also increase based on the construction costs of that project. The same happens with a vacant piece of land with a new house added. But the much more common scenario with new construction is that the land is acquired within the same year as the house is built. So either you buy something turnkey from a developer, like you just buy a completed new construction home, or you buy a piece of land and immediately pull a permit and start building. And in that scenario, what happens is, because you've purchased, assuming it's a non-cap eligible purchase, so what happens is the cap resets on that property. So in the following assessment roll year, you're not eligible. And the reason for that is your cap would equal your assessed value. There needs to be something for it to be based on.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you bought the property from a builder last year and it was assessed for $80,000 as a vacant lot. We add a new construction dwelling to it. The assessment's now $500,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that $500,000 would be what your cap would be based on in 2025. So our system would automatically take $500,000, add the CPI, then look at where your assessment is for next year once the market has been included. So let's assume it continues to increase and it's now 580, but the CPI is only 2%. You'd probably see some cap there. But you only see the cap on the notice if it benefits you. It's always resetting to the lower of the 2 numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say in a scenario where this is very unlikely, but let's say the CPI was provided to us at 10% next year, but we determine the market in Clare has only moved 5%. So in that scenario, you wouldn't see a cap on the notice because your assessment would actually be a better deal for that property owner, or a lower taxable assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And then any future cap is based on that lower number. So it's always resetting to the bottom number, basically. Does that help to answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does. Just another thing before you. So
Sure.
you had mentioned 10% cap earlier. So is there a cap on the cap, or can it go as high as whatever?
No. So the cap legislation specifies that we have to use the consumer price index to
Okay.
adjust the capped assessments. So there's only two ways that a cap can change if all other things remaining equal, right? So assuming that eligibility remains the same,
Right.
a cap can change due to physical changes to the property that are being added to the cap. So new construction, something built on the property that wasn't there before, or a significant renovation to what is already there, or the CPI annually.
Right.
So if you imagine all of these 89% of the residential properties in Clare that are capped, all of those properties would have had the CPI added to last year's cap. And then after we add the CPI, we say any physical changes. In the vast majority of cases, the answer is no. But if there's been a building permit, a site visit to determine physical changes, we then add that in addition.
Right.
And that is your cap for the next year.
Good. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments on? I just have one more while we're on the cap talk, I guess.
Always a popular topic.
It seems to, you guys seem to be well versed on the on the topic.
We talk about it a lot.
If somebody isn't happy with their assessed value but they're capped and they request an assessment, does that trigger a lift off the cap, or does that depend as well?
This is an excellent question. So thank you for it, because I coach assessors. I'm very involved with our appeal process throughout the province, and I do a lot of sort of coaching assessors on messaging around this sort of principle, because a cap can only, by nature of the legislation and the regulations that surround cap, the way that it's written in the Assessment Act and the attached regulations to the Assessment Act that deal with cap and who's eligible and what adjustments we can make, including things like the CPI, there's no provision for a cap to go down. So if you're assessed at 200,000 and capped at 150, and you send us an assessment appeal, and the assessor has a look at the assessed value and finds that, I've looked at the market sales in the area, and I really think that the high end of the market for a home like this is 180,000, and I think this person has sent us a reasonable case, and we're going to reduce the assessment a little bit on that basis. So we reduce the assessed value to 180,000 at that point. The property owner gets an amended assessment notice. But because the cap is 150,000, the taxable assessment isn't changing in that scenario. The cap wouldn't go down by the same amount. We don't have the ability to make it go down. So we often explain this to property owners, not to dissuade them from appealing or to make any representation that we wouldn't look at their assessment, but just to be very clear as to sort of what number we have control over and which number we don't. So the only way that we can change a cap or make it lower is in a scenario where the cap has been incorrectly calculated. So the only common scenario I can see where that's the case is in a scenario where we've done a building permit for new construction, and we've been on site, had a conversation with a contractor, property owner, and they've indicated that our cutoff date for physical state is December 1st. So we make a site visit 2 weeks before that. The contractor says, "Oh yeah, we're going to be half done by December 1st," and then the trusses are delayed, and so the building was not roof tight at December 1st. That may have a cap implication, because remember that construction value is being added to the cap. So in that scenario, we may adjust the cap to correct the adjustment that was greater than it should have been based on our understanding at that date. So that's a scenario where we may adjust a cap. The only other one on appeal is if the eligibility has been determined incorrectly. So the common one that I see in appeal work is when a married daughter who has taken the name of her partner acquires a piece of property from a parent. And so that transaction is cap eligible under Section 45, and that daughter can keep the cap that the parents had, all things remaining equal. But it's unknown to us because the names are different when we get the transaction. So these are things that, and folks can sort of mitigate that by just letting us know, giving us a call, or having their lawyer file a what's called a Form 1 for transfer on behalf to avoid that situation. It's relatively rare, but in terms of situations where we change the cap, I would say that's one of the more common situations. But in the scenario where it's a dispute over market value or the assessed value of the property, regardless of the results of the appeal, if the results of the appeal don't drop below the existing cap, the taxes aren't going to change for that property owner.
Perfect. Thanks. The only thing on that would be the following year, are they still eligible for the cap because they open the eligibility
Absolutely.
stays? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Eligibility doesn't change.
Yeah.
As long as they meet all the other criteria, all things remaining equal. And just briefly, the other scenario that I'm thinking of here is in my 200,000, 150,000 scenario. If for some reason, let's say the property was significantly physically damaged by, say, a natural disaster, or there was a fire at the property that we were unaware of, and we actually reduced that value below the capped assessment, so we arrive at a value of 100,000, let's say, then that would become the taxable assessment and be the basis for future capped assessments. So getting back to that, it's always the lower of the two. So if it does go below, then of course the lower number is the number that the taxes will be applied to, but it's always the lower of the two. So if the cap remains the lower of the two, then it's going to be that number.
Perfect. Answers my question. I don't know if there's any more. I think honestly it was a good touch up on our cap knowledge. I guess we'll be ready for the phone calls. I don't know. We have all the staff in the crowd here. Hopefully, I seen they were taking notes, so we'll be all set for the next round of calls.
Well, feel free if you get one that stumps you, the phone the 800 number or send something through to the website through the email.
Perfect.
Yeah, we're always happy to chat. Thanks very much.
All right. No, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Wim. Thank you, council, and thank you, staff. Always a pleasure to be here, and maybe we'll see you next year.
Sounds
Thanks
good.
for having us. Take care.
All right.
All right.
We'll
Thanks.
see you. Bye.
Là, ça finit notre présentation.
Let's finish our presentation. We bring us to number 5, adoption of the minutes. 5.1 is the meeting of the February 21st of our regular council meeting. Have you had a chance to look at this? Are there any errors or omissions? If not, does somebody want to propose this? Councillor DeVos, seconded by Conseiller Comeau. All those in favor? Against? Motion carried. 7.2 was the meeting of March 6th, council and committee meeting. Have you read this one? Proposed by Councillor Hill and seconded by Councillor Goodell. Those in favor? Against? Motion carried. For translation for...
Is your translation working now?
No?
No? Il est branché. Still not working? Still not working?
Check. No?
Test, check. 1, 2, 3. C'est Dave's.
Yeah?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Hello, hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, hello, hello. Testing. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Hello, hello.
Yep.
Hello. Okay, good.
Okay. So this brings us to number 6, business arising from previous council meetings. There's nothing there. Number 7, warden's activity report. I was, on the 26th of February, I was at the opening of the Circadian Center. Stefan and I were there. It was nice to see everything was in order, and everything has been good ready for the Congress. So on the 27th of February at the regular meeting of the Acadian Villa, This gave us an update on the old building that will be opening. It should be ready sometimes next month. It's going forward there quite good. It's a two-phase approach. Most of the beds are ready, and then there will be a second phase that will involve setting the rest of the rooms. On the 28th of February, I went to a meeting with the councillors and the CEO and sort of found Jeff LeBlanc to do an update on the incidents, recent incidents in our community, and what's been done about it. It was more of a presentation with possibilities of to acquire other resources and how they're gonna go forward to access more resources on their side. It was quite informative for us.
On March 13th, I attended to a regular meeting of the Western Wren Oversight Committee. At that meeting, Mr. Guy Surratt was elected president and Gildaire vice president. So these are the same as last year. That's about it. On March 15th, I attended a meeting of the Board of Directors of Economic Development Acadian. And on March 16th, I attended a meeting with the members of councillors and our CEO to discuss the project of the renewal for the Veterans Center on the next steps for that. And there'll be more in Stefan's report tonight. On March 16th, there was the choosing committee for the Volunteer of the Year. It went well. That's my report. Any questions or comments? If not, we will go on to item 8, official statements from members of council. Does anybody have any official presentation? Nope. If not, we will go on to number 9.1, Doug Wenzel, Director General, Regional for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Honourable Chrystia Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, has forwarded a copy of your correspondence of March 31st, 2023, to the Honourable Joyce Murray, former Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard, on May 2nd, 2023, regarding the breakwater at Meteghan, Digby County. I have been asked to respond on the Minister's behalf. Fisheries and Oceans Canada Small Craft Harbours program officials continue to work with the Harbour Authority of Meteghan for the short and the long-term harbour infrastructure needs at Meteghan. Small Craft Harbour program officials met with the Harbour Authority on February 16, 2023, to discuss the infrastructure needs at Meteghan Harbour. Identified projects will be prioritised and evaluated against other regional priorities on an annual basis. Of note, basin dredging was carried out this summer. Thank you for writing. I hope that this information is helpful in addressing your concerns. Yours sincerely, Doug Wenzel, Regional Director General, Maritimes Region.
I will not lie, I forgot that we had this letter. It took a year to get here. Do you have any questions or comments on this, Councillor DeVoe? Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm not sure if it is a question. Is it the same department where we would write to clean the boats that are staying at the wharfs in Sonyville and others? The situation with the boat in Sonyville is with Transport Canada that we deal with. That being said, depending on the situation, Coast Guard is involved and the two departments work together. But on that project, on that question for the abandoned boats in Comoville, we did some progress. The communication agent was really busy with the department on this, and we have information to give you, but I don't have it here tonight, but I will bring it at the next meeting. There was a progress It's a long process, but it is going forward. Any more questions or comments on this? If not, we will go to item 10, the Chief Administrative Officer's report. Thank you. I just want to go through a few projects for the Clare Health Center, the work for the expansion, the roof. We expect that it will be finalized this week. All the windows will be installed by next Tuesday, March 26th. We had updates on the furniture and the layout of the exam rooms in the new section. The ductwork is 70% complete. For the cladding, for the exterior, the contractor was on site this week for field measurements. The order has been placed this week. Drywall in the existing building for both stories will be completed by next Wednesday, March 27th. We will have, within the next 2 weeks, a new well that will be drilled on site. The well that we have now cannot furnish with the expansion, but with the original plan, there were supposed to be 2 wells. The well is on the plans, but we don't find it on the site, so we need to dig a second well. But it is something we had budgeted on, that we knew before the start, so we will have a bit of more progress on this in a few weeks. The framing on the extension, especially on the second floor, is complete, and we are starting on the lower floor now. A partial handover for the doctors with the new doctors, where the doctors can come. We are looking at the end of April, beginning of May. So it is something that will be done as we go, as an office is ready to install a doctor, and it doesn't prevent them and the workers from doing their work. For the Clare Veterans Center, I will talk about this under new business, under 12.2. For the Metegan sidewalks, there again, I will talk about this under new business, under item 12.1. For the extension of the sewer system on the Sunset Road in Metegan, we have no new development on this. We are waiting for more information on plans for the site. For the Wentworth Park, we had a new application to the province under Community Accessibility Program. The deadline was February 14th, and that's for the purchase and the installation of an extensive kayak launch, and to replace a bridge that is not accessible in the park. So we are looking at a total project of $67,152, and the total request from the province is $50,000, which is the maximum. For the Clare and Argyle Tourism Development Project, it is the signage that we have with the municipality of Argyle. The narrations are complete. We have 3 vignettes in Clare that have been completed. The one for the cross in Grosscock, Église, St. Bernard Church, and Parc Joseph and Marie du Gard, and 4 more are in draft with the Pointe Major, Université Sainte-Anne, Sacré-Cœur Church, and CIFA Radio. And Argyle has 2 vignettes in draft as well. There are 676 in total to produce, so we know that we'll be working on the vignettes until the end of May, but we are satisfied with the progress that is happening. The research for the interpretive panels is almost complete. We need 3 more panels to finalize. One is the monument for Jerome, the lighthouse at Cape St. Mary, and the visitor center in Yarmouth. The design for the panels is well underway, and we think it should be complete between now and the end of the month. I saw a few samples, and it is really good. It is impressing. The signs in Argyle Yarmouth will be different from ours, but they should be ready by the end of April. The printing, for this reason, will be done in 2 phases. The ones in Clare will be first because we are a bit more advanced, and those of Argyle's will follow. The installation for all the panels is planned for June. And finally, on this project, we had 2 tender calls for the map brochure and another for a website. The tender call, the tender was closed on March the 8th. The project committee will meet tomorrow in Argyle to evaluate the tenders, and we hope to bring a recommendation to the next meeting in April. The goal for this project remains to have it completed by mid-July 2024. It is close to the Congress, but we knew in advance, and we are still optimistic that this work will be done before the Congress.
For the lighting at the track and field, you have probably already seen it, but I'm glad to be able to say that all 4 posts with the lights are now mounted, and I think they are trying to do some testing today today or tomorrow to see if the lights are working in a correct way. There's a bit of formation for the crew at the university who does that, and essentially it will be passed to the university so that they can administer this project. It's good to see this. The fire service review that we're doing in collaboration with Clare Fire Department Association, the submission has been published, and it's gonna close next Friday on the 29th of March. The intention is that we will try this, depending on how many submissions we receive, we'll be able to evaluate this and get a recommendation for this in the month of April. For the Cape St. Mary Lighthouse Park, the preparations for the roof have been completed. We have a new roof. It does not leak anymore, so there's no more. The Fisheries and Oceans equipment is now safe. For the picnic shelter, there's a little bit of work left to finish that one, the roofing there, but we think it will be completed in a short while. There's a few repairs to do to the lighthouse itself, a few shingles that have to be replaced, but this is because a result of the high winds we got earlier. The project that we're doing in collaboration with the Historical Society for the Sustainable Community Shelter Fund, the project has been recommended for approval. It's been recommended to the minister in Nova Scotia, and I'm being told that all the projects from this program, Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund, the decisions will be made in the month of April, so we have a few weeks to wait for this one. For the project of the land use bylaw and municipal strategy planning review, we're still discussing with Stantec. The consultants are preparing a preliminary report, and for what they've done up to now with public consultations and surveys with individuals in this community, and also the survey that was done online. We're waiting to have a copy of this report to present to you. Finally, financially speaking, as of February 29, 2024, the municipality had $11,962,659 in revenues, $11,328,190 in expenses, for a surplus of $634,469. Also, as of February 29th, the municipality had a balance of 2,348,574 in its operating fund, 351,035 in its capital fund, and a total reserve balance of 4,116,651. Also, the credit line we had for the expenses had a balance of 2,693,714. That is my report. I don't know if you have any questions on this report. Does anybody have questions or comments on this report? It's nice to see that our interpretive panels will be finished soon. Number 11, committee reports. Building permits by Councillor Hill.
Construction report, as of the end of February 2023, we had 18 permits issued for a value of construction of $1.1 million. And at the end of this February 2024, we had 14 permits issued for a value of construction of $588,000. So it's down a little bit to start the year, but I'm sure it'll pick up.
Does anybody have questions or comments on this report? If no, we go to the waste 11.2 waste check with Councillor DeVoe. Thank you, Mr. Warden. This is the last reminder that the new bags this week, it's the green carts that are at the road. Next week it will be the garbage bags. It is the last time next week that you can use the bags that are not clear. This includes orange or black bags. We can only then use clear bags, except if you have a variance that has been arranged by WasteCheck. Those have a variant, they know what I'm talking about. They can still put some at the roads, but we don't have many that fall under this category. So next week is the last time you can use these bags that are not transparent. For those people who still have these dark bags, I suggest that if you want to use them, not to throw them away, use them. If you have recyclables or plastic to sell at the depot, you can use them. You can use these bags when you have recycling stuff to bring at the depots. But if you want to use them, please use them for those things. And then eventually we'll run out of those. That's all I have for this week. This month, are there questions or comments on this report? So we're there for the end of the black bags. 11.3 Police Advisory Board, Councillor Briand DeVoe. Thank you. The committee met on March 4th, 2024 with the Sergeant Jeff LeBlanc and Caporal Vincent McGraw for the incidents of vandalism and break and enter. They're still looking at these cases. The arrestations have been done, arrests, and cases are still evolving as the RCMP is looking at these cases. At the end of February of this year, there was something in because of all the crimes recently in our community. Their supplementary resources for the RCMP are present in Clare, and there are no additional costs for the municipality when this happens. The sergeant mentioned that the recent incidents of criminal fires, arson, are probably related to the lobster fishery. Members of the public have said that they were worried that the time that the RCMP takes to get to the crime scene, for instance, to answer to a urgent situation, sometimes it can take them 50 minutes. The RCMP thinks that there are more requests for this, and it would, if they were going faster, this will not the additional staff might facilitate to we're concerning the Elver fisheries. The Department of Fisheries have confirmed that the closure of this type of fishery. The minister, federal minister, thinks that the closure would help to control the restoration of this type of fisheries. According to Sergent Leblanc, there are problem zones in Clare, and even though the fisheries is not the responsibility of the RCMP, they feel that they are involved.
For the murder in concession on February 22nd, the investigation continues. The sergeant of the detachment in Meteghan contacted Major Crimes, and they were advised that the most of the lab results for forensics have been received, and there is no risk that the investigation be closed because the accusations have not been brought forward. When the accusations are in place, there is a maximum 18-month period for the case to be presented before a judge. So when an individual, for example, is charged for a crime, it is at that time that the 18-month period starts. For the RCMP report, Sergeant LeBlanc presented a report with the statistics from December 31st, 23 to March 24. 382 calls were received during this period, and includes fire or arson damages, 11 calls, and vandalism and steal and at businesses, 5, driving problems, 4, and one case of accident with mental health problems, and calls regarding mental health becomes a proper problem with the municipality. For drinking and driving, there were 5 calls and 4 have been charged. And the last thing is the uttering threats. There were 2 calls for services on this. So that is my report. If you have any questions, I will try to answer. Thank you for that. Any questions or comments on Councillor Comeau's report? It is well detailed, gives us a good overview of the incidents in the community. It's not nice to see, but that's what it is. So that concludes the committee report. We are going under new business, item 12.1, a motion to grant and accessibility improvements to the sidewalks in Meteghan. Thank you. We had a tender call for the sidewalk in Meteghan. We received 2 tenders. The lowest tender is the one that we recommend. It's for a total of $2,674,000, which includes the HST, and from Garian Construction Limited, they were the low bidder. We only received 2, but the 2 were very competitive and 2 reputable companies, but based on the discussions with the engineers, the one that we recommend tonight The project for the almost 2.8 million is entirely financed, and the majority of these funds come from the federal government and provincial government, and the municipal contribution is 626,000, which is about 22 or 23%, which is excellent leveraging on an infrastructure project at this time. So that being said, it is my recommendation that because the project is so well financed and we did receive a tender, it's inside our budget. It's my recommendation that we accept Garian Construction for the sidewalk in Mitagan, and if the council agrees, it places us to start the project in the spring of this year. So I don't have a specific date, but as soon as the temperature allows us, we can start it and finish it in the fiscal year. Any questions or comments? If not, does anybody wish to motion? Conseiller Como? I move that the Council for the Municipality of the District of Clare award the tender for the sidewalks in Mitagan to Garian Construction Limited in the amount of 2,674,990 plus HST, and that these funds be taken from the municipality's capital reserve. Moved by Conseiller Como, seconded by Deputy Warden Poitier. All those in favor? Against? Motion is carried. That's a good project that can go forward. 12.2, we have a motion to accept the construction management services for the Clare Veteran Center. For the renewed Veteran Center, we are finalizing the conceptual plans. The design drawings are 75% done, so this work is completing. So the work that will probably take place between now and the final plans, there should be no problems. For our procurement strategy to bring this forward, it is the recommendation of Grey Cardinal that we continue with a management approach, construction management support. So we offered a tender call earlier in February, and I don't have the date that it closed, but a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of the month. So that being said, we received two evaluations or two submissions, two tenders, two companies with which we dealt with in the past and are very reputable. Following these evaluations of these two submission tenders, it is the recommendation of Grey Cardinal and myself that we grant the contract to Burt Construction, and the two tenders were structured with monthly installation. So we are looking at 3 phases: pre-construction, construction, and warranty, a lump sum that we give at the end of the project. So it is the monthly contributions that we do. We met last year with Grey Cardinal to ask questions and regarding the project, where we are going, and to discuss this strategy to go forward. The members here tonight agreed, so it is our next step that we need to do to have the project go forward. So if the council decides to make the motion this evening, then we will proceed immediately to grant the contract and start a kickoff meeting with the new construction manager. And then we will have a focus on the design for the building, but also the cost estimates to make sure that we are comfortable with the budget as we go forward. So there are other tenders that will come out from this. There will be a press release that we have prepared, It's in draft now, but we will bring out shortly to advise the public of where we are with the project, as well as the following steps. And we hope to have action on the site in the fall. So that being said, if you agree, I will ask you to accept the motion from Bird Construction for the construction management services for the Veteran Center. Any questions or comments on this item? We discussed it quite a bit last night, so it's more or less what Mr. Sear just said, for those who weren't there. Does anybody wish to make the motion? Councillor Hill?
I move that the council for the municipality of the District of Clare accept the proposal from Bird Construction for the construction management services at the Clare Veteran Center, based on the following fee schedule, and that these funds be taken from the municipality's capital reserve. Pre-construction, $21,725 per month. Construction, $52,000 per month. Warranty, $60,000 lump sum.
Proposed by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Godin. All those in favour? Against? Motion carried. This brings us to 12.3, motion to accept the proposal Phase 1 environmental site assessment for 15 Control Road at Little Brook. Thank you. The municipality is now discussing with the developer to look at the development of this field, the development of this area on number 15 Cottrell Road in Little Brook. We're looking at a project to create new housing for the community as part of this process that we're following to prepare the land. We have already done we had somebody who determined the limits of the land, and what we're proposing as a second phase is an environmental site assessment. The reason that we propose this evening is because if the developer with whom we're dealing with, or even another development in the future, we'd be able to ask the province for financing if we look at our project to do some environmental and affordable housing. So this work will position us to work on this piece of land, to work with future developers. So we want to be prepared to make this go forward. I hope it works very well with the developer that we're discussing the project now, and I have everything this will be going ahead in a positive manner. So we launched a tender for environmental assessment. We got 5 submissions. They were very comparable as far as price and work. Most of them we have dealt with them in the past. So the recommendation that we came with, my recommendation that we proceed the submission of Alltech Environmental Services, who had the low bid for this case, for an amount of $2,800 plus HST. Is there any questions or comment on this item, Councillor Godin? I will make the motion. I move that the Council for the Municipality of the District of Clare accept the proposal from Alltech Environmental Services Limited for the completion of a Phase 1 environmental site assessment at 15 Cottrell Road, Little Brook, Nova Scotia, for the amount of $2,800 plus HST. Proposed by Councillor Godin, seconded by Councillor Deveau. All those in favour? Against? Motion carried. 12.4, motion to approve a community flagpole request from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. This committee Municipal Committee, the Accessibility Advisory Committee, they want to float the flag of accessibility during this National Week of Accessibility, which is the 27th to the 31st of May. So we followed the process to explain this such of these. So I think we did this last year, and certainly it is my recommendation that we approve the request of the committee and that we fly this flag at the dates. Are there questions or comments on this motion? Conseiller Como. I move that the Council for the Municipality of the District of Clare approve the Accessibility Advisory Committee's request to fly the accessibility flag on the municipality's community flagpole in recognition of National Accessibility Week from May 27th up to and including May 31st, 2024. Proposed by Conseiller Como, seconded by Conseiller Deveau. Councillor Deveau, all those in favour? Motion carried. 2.5, motion to designate municipal heritage property for the former Sebanor Church. Thank you. We've been approached by the president of the Association of the Jean Leblanc, who's on this, asked us if we'd be ready to designate this structure as a municipal heritage property. Mr. Leblanc sent us a letter, has given us the reasoning why they would like the site should be considered as a heritage by the municipality. First of all, it's the architectural aspect of this church, and secondly, it's also the Gothic style of the church. This being said, we looked at the Heritage Act of Nova Scotia, and the council has the ability to designate certain properties as heritage properties at the municipal level. Part of the reason that this request has been presented, that the recognition is well merited, but it will allow them to open doors for financing that will come in to finance some of their efforts to preserve this building. The group would like to make certain submissions before the end of the fiscal year, so that's why we're presenting this evening. We all know about this church, that is very impressive church, that is a very good prospect for as a heritage property. So this is the motion we're going to present this evening. Are there questions or comments on this one? Councillor Douza. I will do the motion. I move that the Council for the Municipality of the District of Clare designate the former Sebanor Church as a municipal heritage property. Proposed by Councillor Douza, seconded by Councillor Hill. All those in favour? Against? Motion carried. 12.6, motion to transfer funds from the operating fund to the capital reserve for the SEDA upgrades for Bellevos Cove wastewater treatment plant. Thank you. We did we did some works on this plant for upgrades to the system. The SEDA system allows our tree plants to work in conjunction throughout the municipality, so we did some work necessary to carry out this work. These upgrades have been financial as part of our operational budget, but in reality it was not something that was foreseen in our capital budget. So this being said, it was the recommendation that we do a motion to essentially transfer funds from our operational fund to the reserve fund. This is not something everything we do this, we need a motion from council to these such transfers. That is why we're presenting this tonight, because this was necessary to render our system functional. So that's why I'm proposing this motion this evening. Clarifications or questions on this one? If no, does somebody like to do motion? Councillor Douce. I move that the Council for the Municipality of the District of Clare authorize the transfer of $14,040 from the municipality's operating fund to the capital reserve to properly capitalize recent CEDA upgrades to the municipality's wastewater treatment plant in the Levels Cove. Proposed by Councillor Douce, seconded by Deputy Warden Potier. All those in favor? Against? Motion carried. This ends our. We don't have any closed session tonight. The date and of their next regular municipal meeting will be April 17, 2024. This being said, I'd like to say good evening to everybody, and we need a motion to adjourn. Proposed by Councillor Douce. That's it. Thank you and good evening.